Hi everyone, I'm Matt Uttley, the Project Manager for the Essex Native Oyster Restoration Initiative. And I'm just going to give a brief overview of how we put together an information board in Essex. Any questions, please just shout out during this talk, or you can email me afterwards, matt@bluemarinefoundation.com. So before I actually start, I want to let you know that our information board isn't actually installed yet. We plan to install it earlier this year, but due to COVID, like most things, it's been delayed. But we have more or less finished. Just need to get the final design approved, printed off, and then it will be installed. Hopefully this year, but we'll just monitor and see how things go. So when we were designing our board in Essex, the key considerations, as laid here, were the purpose of the board, what we wanted to achieve from it, the audience, so who it was for, the content, what we wanted to include, and how we were going to present that, and then quite importantly, where we were going to put the board and what permission did we need to do that. And then in terms of the board itself, what materials we were going to use and how we were going to install it. So purpose, when we first set about looking to create the board, we had to decide what we wanted to achieve from it, what was the point of putting it there, and who was it going to benefit. So I think for each project this will be different, and probably different for each individual board if you have more than one within a project as well. For us in Essex, our site is subtidal, so this makes it really difficult to engage with the public and to show them the work that we're doing. Other than sharing things online and giving talks, there's very little way we can show them the work we're doing. And if no one's on site, then there's really no way of them knowing that the work's going out. So the photo here shows where we're doing our physical restoration. It's right in front of one of the main beaches in Mersey. But if we're not out there doing the work, then to everyone else it just looks like your normal seascape. So we wanted people to be aware of the physical restoration work that's going on and the vital habitat that is in front of them, albeit out of their line of sight. So in terms of the audience, it was really important for us to decide who we wanted this board to be for. Obviously, for us, that's members of the public. So this, if you think of the members of the public, it's kind of really vary in their knowledge and understanding of oysters, of physical restoration work, and of the natural environment. There'll be some people who have a really good knowledge of this and some who don't know anything. So you want the board to be as effective as possible and to be able to reach as many people as possible without it being too complex. So your information needs to be there, the main headlines, but you also don't want it to be sort of too deep and too complex. So you consider who it's for, the members of the public, what their basic knowledge is, and consider their age and ability. In order for the board to be successful, it needs to be accessible to as many people as possible. So that sort of brings us onto our next point, which is the content. If your board's just really text heavy, then it's going to put people off before they even get to it. So for us, we wanted to consider how we could make it eye-catching and interesting. So to do that, we commissioned some artwork from a local artist in Mersey. And we came up with the idea of putting sort of almost like a timeline along the bottom of the board from the current state of the seabed, where there's no oysters, you've got very little life going on, and slowly move through the stages of restoration into the image you can see in the bottom corner here, which is sort of the restored rich seabed full of oysters and other creatures. For this way, that sort of exciting, colourful piece of artwork is going to draw people in, and then we can get them reading the main topics and our main sort of headlines on the board in the text. In terms of that text, obviously I said you don't want it to be really text heavy. So we decided a good way of using, of having information available is to use QR codes. So it's not, when we were talking about it initially, it wasn't something I'd ever actually used before. But with Track and Trace this year, it's something I've started using, and I know a lot of other people have, and realised how easy it is to have the code there. And by quickly scanning it, you can have endless amounts of information available to those who want to go further and want to read more about the work that you're doing. But it's optional then. They don't have to see a board full of loads and loads of text. You can have the main take-home points there that anyone and everyone can read and understand. And those that really want to go into more detail and want to read about specific parts of the projects can do. Equally, you don't have to have a single QR code to all of the information. For each main point on your board, you can have an individual QR code. So if someone's only interested in a certain aspect of your work, they can go directly to that point. So a really key point for us was where we were going to put the board. So we wanted to obviously reach as many people as possible. So for us, we were looking at two main sites, and these are the images here. So the top site is the main jetty in Mersey. It obviously has a high footfall of people, and people who are generally interested in the marine environment, whether they're using the jetty recreationally or sort of commercially, that they're all going out to reach boats, to take boat trips. So these are people who are interested in the marine environment and therefore are likely to have an interest in our project and in the work that we're doing. The other site we were looking at, the bottom image, is, as I said earlier, the main beach looking out over our restoration site. So initially we thought that wouldn't have as high a footfall as the first site, but actually it's right next to a holiday park. There's one of the only cafes on the beach is there. And so anyone going to the beach, particularly sort of over the summer and stuff when it's been very busy, is going to be using this entrance. The nice thing about the bottom site, and what actually led us to choose this site for the initial installation of the board, is the fact that it overlooks our project site. So we found that it had direct relevance to the project and would enable people to stand there, read the information, and be able to be looking out over the site that they're sort of reading about. So the next sort of consideration was then whose permission did we need to put the board in. So it's, for us, we had to go to Colchester Borough Council, not just West Mersey Town Council. This was just based on land ownership and permissions required. So it's worth considering that before you decide fully on a location, is whose permission you're going to need. Is it actually feasible to have the board there? Yeah. So in terms of the physical build, so this is something to think about initially in your budgets, how you're going to go about designing the board. So for us, the main cost, if I run through budget-wise, the board itself, the actual sort of physical board that we were installing, was about £850. The most expensive aspect of the board was actually the design and artwork. So the artwork was over £1,000 and design about 400. So although that seemed expensive to start with, what that actually meant was once we had the base sort of design and artwork done for the board, we can reproduce the board relatively cheaply. So it may mean that we can put boards in more than one location once we've got that basic design. In terms of the sort of materials and costs, that obviously can vary quite a lot. But you need to really consider longevity of the build. So for us, putting it in that exposed environment right next to the sea, it's going to suffer from exposure there, and there's no point putting it there using materials that aren't going to last. So yeah, you've got to build all of that into your initial planning, but it can be done relatively cheaply to a relatively high standard. So yeah, that's sort of the process we've been through in Essex. Hopefully that's helpful in understanding how we went about putting the board together and the main sort of considerations we've had. I know a lot of it is fairly sort of self-explanatory, but hopefully in that order and knowing what we've been through is helpful. So thanks for listening.
Thank you very much. Let's just start my video again. So, yeah, the thing is that I will basically say the same, more or less. So it's good to see that everyone is making the same experiences at some point, or that it's at least comparable between countries and projects. That's really nice to see. With the QR codes, I just wanted to add that we also use our project link for it. You probably do as well, right? So that you don't have to put all the foundation information and stuff all in the boards.
Yeah, exactly that. You can have links straight to websites and social media and stuff, so you don't have to have the same with obviously we're a collaboration of a lot of different organizations. You don't want to have everyone's information on there and clog up the board. So it's keeping it really simple and easy for everyone to navigate by having the information elsewhere and easily accessible. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's a really helpful tool to be able to use.
Yeah. And another thing I wanted to ask was with the copyright, did you have any problems with that? Because I know with pictures, for example, when you let people take pictures for your board or for any product, you always have to keep in mind that you gain the copyright of that. Was that a problem with the artist or was that just expensive at the end?
I'm not sure in terms of people taking pictures of his work on the board. I'm not 100% sure. Not in terms of that. Obviously, it's artwork we've commissioned from him, so I don't know whether I don't know if we then hold the copyright or he still does. Something I can certainly find out and check.
Yeah, but you have to name the artist on the board probably then.
Yeah, I imagine we would do.
Okay. Yeah, because that's what we also I didn't had in mind before I started doing outreach work, that you, of course, for every picture that you didn't take by yourself or painted by yourself, you always have to keep in mind to get the copyright. And sometimes it's the last thing before you want to print it, and then it's taking so much time again to find out, or you even have to change the picture. So that's
I think all the images we use are stuff that we've taken within the project, and likewise because we got the artwork commissioned for the board, I think that makes it sort of easier.
Yeah, that's true.
Certainly, if you were to find the pictures elsewhere or use other people's images, I can imagine that being a pain.
I have a question about the artwork, actually. I think it's beautiful. I wouldn't mind if you flip back to it just so we can admire it a bit.
Yeah.
Thank you. I was just wondering, how science-led was your image? Because it looks fantastic to me. But kind of what did you base this image on?
It's obviously an artist's interpretation of what it could look like. But we gave him sort of associated species that you might expect to see there. And I think then to a large extent has given him free rein on how he envisioned that looking. But yeah, I think I don't think it's. Sorry, I actually can't see. I've got all of our faces over the picture, but I don't think it's too unrealistic. I'd certainly be happy if it ended up looking like that.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying it's unrealistic at all. I was just wondering kind of how much of a lead you and the team gave them on which species should be present, or if.
So I think we gave him
work that goes into an image like this, not just from the artist, I imagine.
Yeah. I think the main thing was just so these are the species we expect to see there, and then he's put it together. I know we did make some tweaks to it. It came back sort of as it was in the top image there. He gave us I'm not sure if that's the middle or the far left sort of in the scale, but came back like that. Said, are we happy with it? Do we want certain species more of, less of? Sort of moved around and stuff. But yeah, it was certainly an interesting process to see him put it together, and yeah, like you said, we were really happy with the end result. I think it's great.
And how long did it take from finding the artist to having the art piece?
It wasn't too long. I think it was a matter of months rather than.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, a couple of months, I think it was all it took.